Hello, America. I'm Rapacki, and this is Arizona Today. It was November 7th or 8th of 2020. I received a phone call from my guest. He was in the legislature, the Arizona legislature, as a senior member of the House of Representatives. Today, he's a senator in Arizona. And he said, Dr. Lyle, I think we need to do a joint legislative hearing on election fraud. And at that time, I had coordinated 4 or 5 joint legislative hearings. And so he felt comfortable that I had the confidence, his confidence, but also the knowledge to go ahead and put together senators and representatives and bring them together for an all-day hearing, 10 hours, I believe it was, where Mayor Giuliani and members of the White House came to Phoenix to explore election fraud. This senator, he was a representative then, chaired that committee. He had brought forward at that time evidence, not opinion, evidence. Through the 10-hour hearing, and then in the days and weeks to come, as you're about to hear, additional evidence. I keep focusing on that because what you're going to hear is what President Trump just came out and announced the other day, that he now believes there's sufficient evidence that a special prosecutor needs to be named and to look into the election fraud of 2020 and 2022. This gentleman led the nation putting together that evidence. So today on the show, what I'd like to do is we're going to go back and recap a few things. We're not going to cover it all because it's pretty extensive, but we're going to recap what happened in 2020 that we learned that brought forward the words fraud in the election, that it was not a legal election. There was lots and lots of not just error, but absolute fraud. So my guest is Senator Mark Finchem. He's a state senator here in Arizona, but this is the gentleman that led the joint legislative hearing in 2020 to uncover election fraud in Arizona. And then it was not even quite a year later, 9 months, that he also co-chaired another joint legislative hearing in Oro Valley, south of Phoenix, because additional evidence came forward to prove the initial evidence that we'd already submitted, but additional evidence came in. And this gentleman, along with Senator Borelli at the time, put together a joint legislative hearing, which again, I was honored to coordinate, and we uncovered phenomenal amounts of evidence. And I don't want to steal from you, but nothing was done. And we're going to talk about that also. It was covered up or pretended to be non-significant. So Senator Mark Finchem, State Senator Arizona Mark Finchem, is my guest. He co-chaired both of those legislative hearings that began to uncover the election fraud in at least 5 states, 6 states, if not further. So Senator, thank you for joining us, and thank you for 5 years ago beginning the process to uncover what President Trump just announced 2 days ago, that there's enough evidence, not opinion, that now a special prosecutor needs to be called to look into this.
So just to revisit that, the technical term is election tampering, because fraud is a specific crime. Election tampering covers a much wider range of things that have been done. Election interference, which technically isn't fraud, but we knew at the time. I was the chairman of the Federalism Committee, which, quite frankly, was the only real committee that was viable to call for an ad hoc committee hearing. The Speaker of the House at the time, now the completely disgraced Rusty Bowers, did everything he could to prevent that hearing from happening. And I think it's poignant that this was at the time of COVID. They said, well, we can only have 10 people in a hearing room at the legislature. Okay. And they said, well, who do you want to testify? What are they going to say? What's the agenda? All these things. kept throwing up all kinds of roadblocks. And eventually I said, you know what, why don't you just keep your meeting room? We're going to go to the public because they're the ones that elected me, not you. And as a result, we had the hearing at the Hyatt Regency downtown, 160 people. It was 10 and a half hours. And I would push back a little bit on nothing happened. So a great deal of evidence, including Colonel Phil Waldron's analysis of internet traffic having to do with some of the things that now have been revealed to be true. The media did everything it could to assist the federal apparatus in covering up frankly, the crimes that were revealed.
Well, besides the media, let me go further.
You're going to have to cut that out.
We will, but let me go further. You spent time, considerable time, bringing forward to the Attorney General of Arizona at that time,
right,
as well as the Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, and ladies and gentlemen, the majority leaders, all sorts of people.
I delivered to each one of those individuals a packet of information that revealed election tampering, and Mark Brnovich, for his part, said there was nothing there. The Speaker of the House didn't even bother to open the package. Yet 14 days later, the Arizona Senate issued subpoenas to the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, all of them. And of course they said, well, we're going to be cooperative and all that. The second the subpoenas arrived, they lawyered up. And there are a number of things that happened that are still to this day somewhat mysterious. For example, allegedly ballots taken to a chicken farm that suddenly goes up in smoke. Never mind that
more than smoke, but yeah.
Never mind that Clint Hickman is an egg farmer. That's kind of an interesting happenstance. And then, of course, we have Stephen Richer, who arrives on the scene, who did everything he could to get elected as a conservative, and then turns around and does everything he could to tamper with elections.
As a recorder.
As a recorder. So, yes, I'm encouraged that, and part of the reason that nothing happened is because under the Biden regime, you had a Department of Justice that was more interested in persecuting parents for standing up for their kids at school board meetings than actually looking at crimes. You have individuals who decided they thought it'd be funny to do a full battle rattle search warrant at Mar-a-Lago and assault. Never before has that happened, by the way.
Right.
Assault a past president's residence. So it became very clear that we did not have a judicial environment that anything could be done. There's a new sheriff in town, and I'm not talking about Jerry Sheridan in Maricopa County. I'm talking about one Donald J. Trump, who loves this country more than he loves himself. And I know that for a fact. That man took a bullet for the American people, and his commitment to justice is steadfast. If nothing else, that round that nearly pierced his skull, I think steeled his resolve to get to the bottom of what happened, not just in 2020, but also in 2022. Now, the appointment of a special prosecutor means that I believe we can anticipate a federal grand jury, which quite frankly I think has been a long time coming, but it's something that is necessary. Because this thing has been tried over and over and over again in the court of public opinion, but not a court of law. We had courts all across the country that chose not to get involved in perhaps one of the largest accusations of fraud in American history, certainly a racketeering case, and I don't throw that word around lightly. But when you have secretaries of state, you have governors, you have county officials, all focused on trying to cover up and destroy evidence having to do with an election, that is a broad-based, there's no conspiracy there. That is a broad-based operation.
Well, you used the word tampering. Can you just very quickly put out three, I'll make it easy on you, 3 examples of the tampering that we uncovered. There was more than 3. There was, believe me. But real quickly,
So
3.
so one thing that is has always been very strange to me, within literally in less than a day, Christopher Krebs, who was the director of CISA, cybersecurity organization for the federal government, came out and said there was no interference electronically with our elections.
I'm laughing
Okay,
because there's evidence.
Time out. Based on what?
Yeah.
Typically, a federal official will not speak until they have evidence that either supports or evidence in the opposition opposes a contention that they're trying to make. Then he leaves office and goes to work for an outfit that has been shown to be part of the election tampering organization. So go figure. Yes, the media is going to make a lot out of Chris Krebs was appointed by the president. Well, Stephen Richer was elected by the people, and he did the same thing. So now we've got this situation where, one, Colonel Waldron was able to show internet traffic, in spite of the fact that there were all kinds of claims that the various election tabulation machines, they were air-gapped. There was no connection to the internet, okay? Air-gap is a red herring. The only thing air-gap means is that you didn't have a cord plugged in from a computer to the wall.
That's right.
Okay? It does not answer Wi-Fi access, Bluetooth access, burst modem access. All of this has been engineered into the motherboards, manufactured by who? The Chinese Communist Party.
That's right.
All of our computer systems that manage elections trace back to the CCP.
That's right.
Some would say that's an act of war. I'm not going to go there, but it certainly is intriguing to show the evidence that Colonel Waldron had that we absolutely had been penetrated by external forces within the machines that were tabulating our votes. That's issue number 1. Issue number 2, a log file error that not only showed up in Maricopa County on the tabulation equipment in 2020, but the same error showed up in 2022.
Right.
Same error. Now, it's common knowledge by this point, perhaps 1 or 2 of your viewers don't know, but when logging into the computers, there's a first, on the login page, there's a folder that says passwords, keys. Open that, and it has what are called the God keys to open the back end of the tabulation software. What could possibly go wrong with that? Not once, but twice, there was a log error that showed an unexpected entry. Now, that was brought forward in the case that Carrie Lake and I filed with U.S. Supreme Court to show that the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors and election officials committed perjury. They lied to the court, and the court did nothing about it.
Right.
Supreme Court said, we're going to decline to hear this. Okay? I'm no fan of John Roberts, by the way. Justice Alito, that's another story. Justice Thomas, these are guys that really do believe in the rule of law.
And the Constitution, yeah.
And the Constitution. You know that funny little
the piece
document.
of paper.
Yeah. The third thing, we now have a whistleblower who has come forward, and I've seen a couple of different numbers from different sources. Anywhere from 300,000 to 700,000 ballots that were pre-printed and shoved into the system in the 2022 election. Now keep in mind, Carrie Lake lost by, what, 10,000 votes? I allegedly lost by 120,000 votes.
Amedee lost by
200.
200 votes, yeah.
With 6,000 provisional ballots that were never counted
That's right.
because the Arizona Supreme Court failed in its duty.
Still haven't been counted.
And then, of course, we've got Kimberly Yee, who won by 350,000 votes, and Tom Horn, the superintendent of public instruction, who won by a landslide. So what that points to is down-ticket ballot count. They didn't mess with the offices that didn't count.
Right.
What they did do is mess with the offices that did. Governor, Secretary of State, and Attorney General. Now, I think that the fact that President Trump has decided to appoint a special prosecutor to look at the 2020 election, I think that they're going to find a trail of deceit and tampering, that even though records have been destroyed, even though records are coming up missing, there's one thing to remember. You can delete something off of a computer, but it never actually goes away. Uh-oh.
And we learned that doing all the evidence, yeah.
So we have also now come to understand that when General McInerney was talking about an assault on a place in Germany called Seidel, everybody made him out to be a lunatic. Not so much now, because now they'll have the opportunity to examine the hard drive from that facility. They'll have the opportunity to examine real internet traffic and get to the bottom of what the media did everything it could to cover up, calling people like myself an election denier. By the way, that showed up the day, that term showed up the day of the legislative hearing.
Oh, I didn't remember that.
In Arizona.
Oh, I'll be darned.
And within the next several hours, you have nitwit Nancy Pelosi come out and make the claim, well, these audits, they undermine the confidence of the people in elections.
Yeah.
Newsflash, Nancy. No, audits are there to do one of two things. Either prove that something happened or prove that it didn't.
That's right.
So when you have this scrambling of items that just don't seem to connect, that is what you have. Quite frankly, I think it's a sign of schizophrenia, political schizophrenia.
Yeah.
Because you've been caught, and now you have to have a cover story. January 6th. There's a lot to the J6 riot. I think now people have pretty much excused the idea that it was an insurrection. 500 people with a ladder can hardly take over the federal government.
Well, to your point about the leadership of at least Arizona at the time not wanting to even contemplate this was fascinating, but startling. The Governor Ducey was in at that time, Branovich. They didn't want to have anything to do with this. Bowers wanted nothing to do. In fact, all of these people and others.
They were ridiculing me for even doing it.
Well, and they did what they could within their range to stop it all. And ladies and gentlemen, there was a lot of pressure. I mean, believe what you want, but I'm going to tell you on the front line there, a governor, an attorney general, speaker of the House, others in the legislature and otherwise, putting pressure, they really can exert a lot of pressure, believe me.
Well, they can starve you of resources. I mean, when the Senate decided to do the audit, which, by the way, the media came to the wrong conclusion that, there was nothing there. Okay, stop a second. The moment those trucks arrived at the building and unloaded boxes of ballots where the security tape had been tampered with.
They'd already been opened.
That should have been the end of the audit. Right there, you now have an irredeemably compromised election because you can't prove a damn thing.
Yeah.
Then you go on to talk to some of the folks, and by the way, the people that were on the floor analyzing the ballots and going through that whole thing, Democrats, Independents, Republicans, it was a mix.
Yes.
Okay, so this was not some Republican witch hunt,
no,
as the media made it out to be. But then Governor Ducey starved the Senate of any security resources in the form of DPS.
That's right.
In fact, Phoenix PD refused to assist with on-site security, even though this is perhaps one of the seminal moments in the United States election history. They wanted nothing to do with it. form your own conclusion about that. But even people that were part of the audit, I mean, I'm talking about the people that were handling the ballots, over time recognized through tactile definition a difference in paper. Okay, so time out a second. There's a specific paper that was used by Maricopa County to print ballots. I think it's called vote secure paper. It's got a coating on it. It feels different than some of the paper that came through the system.
Yeah.
That would lead one to believe that something appeared in the system that didn't belong. Now, granted, this is an anecdotal.
That's right.
But anybody who is part of, you just start asking the folks who are part of that.
Yeah.
By the way, the grand jury may be asking you to testify, so it's better to be a witness than a suspect.
No, you're pointing out real quickly here today, example after example. We could go on for.
Oh, I got plenty in my bag.
I was going to say we could go on for a whole hour, just example after example. Don't have to explain it, just example after example. And I remember when the Attorney General said there was nothing here, plus it had been tampered with coming to me. So when we did Oro Valley.
Oh, the gal in his office that was in charge of that went absolutely berserk. In fact, she was ready to resign because she had turned over evidence.
That's right.
And he goes on and makes a damn fool of himself on national media, saying there was nothing there.
There was nothing there, and also what did come out of the committee had been tampered with. It did not follow the chain of custody. So when we did Oro Valley, if you remember, I changed exactly who touched what. The chairman couldn't even touch the evidence once the testimony was given, as you'll remember. The person giving the testimony to the joint legislative hearing would sit at a table. I had security right there. When they were finished and excused by the chairman, their documents and evidence and exhibits were packaged right there with the person testifying, and they were seized by security, law enforcement, and then marched out and put into an evidence box and all that. I won't get into it, but we made darn certain that nobody, including the chairman, nobody touched the evidence.
It was to protect chain of custody.
It was a strong chain of custody, which I got a kick out of because a couple of days later, you remember the chief of staff tried to say, well, there's a problem with the collection of evidence, to which point your colleague, Senator Borelli, really came down on them, and we reviewed by video, by the way, also, the whole chain of custody. So that argument had to go away. And I'll remember, and I should produce this, a letter from Bronovich before he left office saying that there was sufficient evidence to do something. Nothing was done. But at least we got a concession out of that, you remember. But what you went through...
It was, unfortunately, the damage was already done.
The damage was terribly done. But what you went through those first 2 years, the mocking and the ridicule was really tremendous. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not like you're on high school playground or grade school and somebody's calling you a jerk or something like that. That would have been easy. The mocking and the ridicule and the obstacles placed before anyone connected to this was horrendous, to be honest with you.
As my good friend Steve Bannon would say, we had the receipts.
That's right.
We were just waiting for the right judicial environment, the right conditions to be able to bring this. Now, this is going to sound like a bold statement, but there is no statute of limitations on treason.
That's correct.
Treason is a Article 10 military tribunal trial. And I believe even the Supreme Court has said, we want none of a civil trial for treason. So with the president's appointment of a special prosecutor for this, and with the full weight of the federal government, I don't think people are just now coming to an understanding of the scope and weight that the federal government can bring to bear on an investigation after living through perhaps the most corrupt Justice Department in the history of the nation under Merrick Garland. Thank God that man was not on the Supreme Court panel. We now know that if those forces, if that same force majeure is brought to bear against the things that Molly Ball, by the way, writer for Time magazine, and that's one thing that's interesting to me. The left always has to brag about what they got away with.
I hadn't thought of that.
Okay, so hold on a second. We have extradition treaties all over the world.
Yeah.
So it's not like you can run away. And we have teams that are able to take you into custody in those countries and bring you back for a trial, especially for something so serious as treason. So, one of the other things that has come to light over the last several years is the money laundering conduit. Since the hearing that we had in 2020, we stood up the Election Fairness Institute, which I'm the executive director at. Captain Seth Keschel is on our board of directors. Seth has done a remarkable job in mapping, I think, about a third of
counties,
U.S. counties,
yeah.
showing where likely voter registration fraud, I'm not voter fraud, voter registration fraud has been epidemic, especially in swing states. Now, we've got to look at this in a number of other states, and through some work that we've done with Dr. Jerome Corsi and Dr. Andy Paquette, the Election Fairness Institute sponsored some of that here in Arizona. We found 250,000 cloned voter registration entities in the last election. 250,000 people that don't exist.
No.
Yet there's a voter registration in their name. So these are the kinds of things that we've been looking at with the Election Fairness Institute, where I'm the executive director. By the way, we're a 501c3. If people would like to see what we do, goefi.org is a great place to get more information and make a donation if you want. But we came across a money laundering operation that now pencils out at over $1.6 trillion. This is money coming in from foreign governments to influence American elections.
Yeah.
We've got the proof. We know how they do it. They do it through real estate transactions and title insurance, and they try to fly below the radar. And if it were not so, I don't remember if it was BMO Harris or if it was TD Bank, paid $1 billion fine to the United States government for what? Money laundering.
Money laundering. Mm-hmm.
Then we've got Wells Fargo that has paid a significant fine for laundering CCP money.
That's just the beginning.
And so we have turned that information over to the Trump administration. We continue to labor away at identifying some of these transactions that are in the hundreds of millions of dollars per transaction. This is not cartel money, okay? Yeah, the drug cartels might be doing some of this to try and legitimize some of their money. This is international influence in our elections.
Chinese.
And it's not just Chinese, it's BRICS nations that want to take down.
Yeah.
It's any nation that would like to cause instability in the United States. I can think of at least a half dozen off the top of my head. Iran, Russia, I maybe.
But to your point, back in 2020,
nobody wanted to believe it.
nobody wanted to believe it, and we uncovered that China was very much involved.
Mm-hmm. And
very much.
quite frankly, Representative Paul Gosar, to his credit, Representative Gosar and Congressman Biggs,
Andy Biggs,
were at the hearing.
You're right.
And they got a dose of what being responsive to the people looks like.
Yeah.
And both of them observed. Then on January 5th, because I could not get any support from the House of Representatives, I flew myself to Washington, D.C. to hand deliver a packet of information so that when the Representatives Gosar and Biggs took to the floor, January 6th, every election cycle for president, that's the day where the congressional delegation officially passes off the electors to the presiding officer of the Senate and the Speaker of the House to say, these are, Arizona presents its electors to be counted, and they are to go to fill in the blank. Except, on the way to the 6th, and Ivan Ranklin has done just a fabulous job of mapping this out, what led up to January 6th. They had to have a diversion of some kind to interfere with that count.
That's right.
Because over 128 congressmen, I think actually the number got to 178, 178 congressmen from various states were going to tell the Speaker of the House and the presiding officer of the Senate, Mike Pence, we have a problem with the election in our state, and we recommend a constitutional remedy.
That's correct.
Return the electors back to the state legislature for ratification.
Which is allowed under the Constitution.
It's a constitutional remedy.
That's
so
correct.
Mike Pence lied to the American people when he said there was nothing I could do.
That's right.
He lied.
Yep.
All right? I'm not going to mince any words. He lied.
That's right.
And in doing so, many would argue participated in a soft coup against a sitting president of the United States. Now, that's a bold claim, but I think that the special prosecutor, once all of the evidence is considered, will probably have a very significant report. And I know the president is very careful about who he puts in those kinds of positions. And I am looking forward to the grand jury. I am looking forward to what the prosecutor, how that he navigates those waters, and what his final work product will be.
And to your point, what we've uncovered and been verified is the number of fake ballots that impacted even Kerry Lake and you. So
Right.
let's leave 2020 alone for just a minute. The evidence is overwhelming that that was a stolen election, sabotage, whatever word you want. Let's go to
Tampered with.
Tampered, okay. 2022, you're running for Arizona Secretary of State. Kerry Lake's running for governor of Arizona. And the same thing, the ballots were just messed up. Huge, false ballots.
Well, and you have machines that suddenly didn't work
They didn't
on
work.
tabulation.
That's right.
And if you compare where those machines were, it just happens to be a heat map for where Republicans vote on day of elections.
Just a coincidence.
Then you have a whistleblower who steps forward from within Runback to say, yeah, they printed 300,000 ballots for Adrian Fontes that would go to Katie Hobbs and shove those into the system. Well, what they didn't mention is at the same time, Adrian Fontes was running against me for Secretary of State.
Yeah.
So that'll be an interesting input into the overall investigation. And I think that this has to do, the president's got a very strong commitment to election integrity because we're a constitutional republic.
Yeah, amen.
And there are people, I can tell you with absolute confidence, there are people in office right now who were not elected. They were selected.
That's right. That's right.
And my good friend Tina Peters sits in jail because she had the temerity to protect records that she was supposed to protect under federal law.
That's right.
52 CFR 20701.
I remember Tina being on my show. You were on with her at one part, and then Tina came back on alone with me. And one of the things that struck me was not only her
Dedication?
Well, I was going to say that allegiance to the law, to the Constitution, to we the people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we the people have a right to elect somebody, whether we agree with who got elected or not, but we have the right. And I was struck by her humility, actually, Mark. Her, you know, you do this a lot. You do the same thing. You meet a lot of people, and after
She's a humble woman.
Yeah, after maybe 1,000 or 2,000 people, you get to be a pretty good judge of what they're like and all that. And she and I were talking, and she was answering my questions, but I was watching her, and just the humility. And then when the camera went off and we had a chance to talk some more,
She didn't change.
her tone didn't change. Nothing changed. She was concerned about the future of Colorado. She was concerned about the future of people. What does this mean if we lose our elections?
Well, she is one who's has seen what happened in Colorado when elections were tampered with in the past. That's why the regime that is in charge in Colorado now, there were questions to whether it's a legitimate regime. Now, add to that, she was protecting records that she predicted Jenna Griswold would destroy. And that's exactly what Jenna Griswold did.
What happened?
So think about this for a moment. I believe it, and I was president for part of Tina's trial. If I remember the number correctly, it's like 52,000 files just in Mesa County, which is a small rural county in Colorado, were obliterated. That's Grand Junction, Colorado. Okay?
Gone.
Those records were obliterated by a trusted build deployment of Dominion software to computers all across Colorado. Under 52 CFR 20701, remember that law. It is the requirement for an official who's in charge of elections to protect and secure election records for a minimum of 22 months post-election.
That's right.
Within months, Jenna Griswold said, we're going to do this trusted build. Don't worry, everything's going to be fine. We're going to back up the records. We'll protect the records, yada, yada, yada. She lied. Jenna Griswold lied. Just Mesa County, 52,000 records. That means 52,000 separate instances of a federal crime. Destruction of election records. 1-year prison term. 52,000 years.
Nothing.
Nothing. But, oh, wait, there's more. It happened in all 62 counties in Colorado.
Yeah.
We are talking about hundreds of millions of records. And because all of the recorders in Colorado realized that they now were in trouble because they failed to do what Tina did,
that's right,
and that is protect those records. They realized that they were now in jeopardy, and what did they do? En masse came against Tina because she had dared to protect the records that she knew would be destroyed.
Yeah, she's a good
So
lady.
in Tina's case, there's now a writ of habeas corpus. I know you probably didn't want to go there, but I want to. She's a Gold Star mom, and she's rotting away in jail.
Yes, she is.
And there is an effort, a legal battle right now that she was improperly prosecuted, that the state prosecuted a federal crime, and now we'll see if the federal courts will extract her from that. And I do hope that the special prosecutor closely examines Colorado and takes action against the elections officials in that state for, once again, tampering with elections. And some of the criminal offenses that they engaged in. Because I think that there's an opportunity for us to clean this thing up. I think President Trump is the guy to get it done.
Yeah, and ladies and gentlemen, I think when the prosecutor comes on board and this really begins in earnest and the reports begin to come out, I think you know a lot now. It's been 4 or 5 years, so a lot's come out publicly, but I think you're going to be surprised at the sophistication of all of this. Satellites were involved. A rehearsal was done a year before the election. I won't get into that right now, but a rehearsal was done. We have the evidence to that and where it was done. And don't you think it's also very interesting that bathrooms plugged up at 1 o'clock in the morning in 6 different states, and water hoses broke in 6 different states?
Yeah, it was all cover story.
Yeah, all about the same time.
Yeah.
In 6 states, toilets backed up, and I'm being a little facetious there. But this was all very well planned to shut down, to get rid of the people out of the electoral facilities.
The observers.
Yeah, the observers, and to shut down the machines because we don't want to fire because the toilet's backed up and everything. But then when we turn the machines back on 4 or 5 hours later, oh my gosh, Mark, you've lost by 100,000 votes or something like that.
Funny how that works.
Yeah, it just really, and I believe what's going to happen, ladies and gentlemen, the evidence is going to come out, not again opinion, not political, the evidence. So I wanted to take this moment with a senator who really led this battle 5 years ago, 2020, started this battle, and oh my gosh, the mocking that went on. That anybody connected to this, and even when we did the forensic audit at the Coliseum with Doug Logan, the mocking, the ridicule by elected officials, as well as by very main groups across this nation, it was pretty tense, pretty uncomfortable. So I wanted to take this moment and discuss it with a gentleman who arguably began all of this 5 years ago, and now President Trump is coming forward to really address, and I pray like you do, that he really gets a prosecutor that will really uncover all of this, and it will unfold. And
I'm hopeful that we already know that the information that we have handed off to Attorney General Pam Bondi and Director Patel on 2 different research projects that the Election Fairness Institute performed. One has to do with voter registration cloning. We know that there's at least one FBI field office that is now working that. The other has to do with money laundering, and that has there's a nexus to Act Blue, Arabella Advisors, the entire machine that was constructed by the Obama administration.
That's right.
For money laundering.
That's right.
And to move money into some of the lowest level races, by the way. We're talking about town councils, county boards of supervisors.
That's correct.
Because I think they came to realize that that's where action actually takes place, not in Washington, D.C. We have over 3,000 counties, parishes, and county equivalents in the United States.
Yeah.
And they were quite careful about the counties they selected. When I say they, I'm going to call them the election gangsters. They knew that they only had to be precise in 6 or 7 counties around the country.
That's right. And that would change things. Yep. Well, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll cover this some more. Again, because the president just came out with this the other day, a couple of days ago, and because Arizona led the charge on this, and that's true. We're not taking anything away from the other 5, 6 states that were involved, but because Senator Finchem led this charge back in November of 2020, it's been a long 5 years, but now we're beginning to maybe see some really positive results. So thank you, Senator, for
My
5
pleasure.
years ago. And then thank you for coming on and allowing us to discuss this, even just briefly today. But we'll bring you more up to date on that. I'm Rapacki, and that's how I see things from Arizona today.